It's over, Mr. Toombs. I don't love Liz anymore. I'm with Candace now.
Who the hell's Candace?
Candace Dickfin inside your mouth.
I get these panic attacks, Papa Xanax relax, trying to stick my fucking dick inside a mannequin's ass, then I get manic depressed, idiot down.
I don't hate Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. I know that might be surprising to hear because how often I criticize the MCU, but honestly, I like all the Spider-Man movies in one way or another, or at least I find things to like about them. And now that I've talked about the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man movies, and the Tobey Maguire trilogy, it's time to talk about Tom Holland's MCU Spider-Man movies. So I'm gonna go about this the same way I went about my Sam Raimi trilogy video, and that's just discuss the things that I liked and didn't like in both Homecoming and Far From Home. But I'm also gonna bring up some of the most common reasons I've seen from people for not liking these movies, and we'll talk about some of those as well. And of course, I'm gonna assume you've already seen these movies, so spoilers ahead. So after making his MCU debut in 2016's Captain America Civil War, Spider-Man officially got his first MCU solo movie the following year in 2017. Just about everybody was hyped for this movie. I mean, it's Spider-Man, so it's hard not to be. And many were curious how it would tie into the MCU. So in May 2017, Homecoming was released, and I gotta say, I really enjoyed it. I found this movie to be a lot of fun, and even after rewatching it several times since its release, I still get a kick out of it. Now, if it isn't obvious, I'm gonna have a lot of good things to say about this movie, so strap in and let's cover the stuff that I liked.
I like boys, I kidnap autistic kids.
For starters, I like the way that it tied into the MCU. Not only do you see Peter's side of the Civil War events and show what happens immediately after, but also takes you back to the events of the first Avengers movie, where you see Toombs' crew cleaning up the mess after the attack from the Chitauri, before they're told to kick rocks by some government organization that teamed up with Stark to clean up the mess instead. So Toombs keeps some of the parts for himself and becomes a weapons dealer, salvaging parts and tech from the aftermath of battles that the Avengers have. And I thought that was a very clever and unique way to tie it into the MCU. While on the topic of Toombs, I want to say that I still think he's easily one of the best MCU villains, and one of my favorite live action villains we've seen in a Spider-Man movie. I'm serious, he's up there with Doc Ock for me. He has a good motivation, and he's also pretty smart. I mean, he figures out Peter is Spider-Man after asking a series of questions and noticing some coincidences. And I like that he can flip from being a happy married father to an intimidating arms dealer. Every scene Michael Keaton is in, he owns it. My favorite scenes of his are the ones where he's in the car talking to Peter, and their conversation later on in the warehouse. Without a doubt, Vulture is one of my favorite characters in this movie. I also like the inclusion of Shocker and Scorpion. I mean, they don't really do much, but it's cool seeing them and knowing that they're there. But yeah, Michael Keaton as Vulture, phenomenal, and still one of the best Spider-Man villains we've gotten. Now, I really like Peter here. I like the young, naive Peter Parker who just wants to be a hero and help people as much as he can. And not only is he funny and confident and cracking wise when he's in the suit, but as Peter, he's really smart and a little awkward too. Not as awkward as Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, but clearly he's not the most popular or normal acting kid. I also appreciate that he's defiant too. After being told to leave the Vulture alone, he continues to pursue him anyway because he feels like it's the right thing to do. And if Stark won't listen, then he'll do it himself. He also takes the tracker out of his suit and unlocks all its features. He's doing what he thinks is right even if it means going against Stark. He's also very proactive and just about everything he does is used to further the goal of stopping the Vulture. So yeah, I really like Peter Parker in this one. It feels like a logical progression from Civil War. And the action is very solid and creative. The encounters with the Vulture are my favorites. And the movie is pretty funny too. It doesn't rely on typical MCU quips to get a cheap laugh, although there are a few in here, but the rest of the humor is pretty well executed and funny. Although there were a few times where the humor did undercut a serious moment, like when Tony and Peter are arguing and Tony takes his suit back. It's a very sad moment, but it ends with Peter telling him he doesn't have any other clothes, and so they immediately cut to him wearing a tourist shirt. I feel like the scene doesn't really need a joke at the end. Would have been better if there was no humor pulling away from the serious moment. But these are pretty few and far between, and for the big moments like Peter lifting the rubble off of him and the final battle with Vulture, there is no humor to drag the situation down. Something else I appreciate is seeing Peter in high school. In the previous iterations, Peter isn't in school for long before graduating, so it's cool seeing him around other students in a classroom as well as dealing with some of the average teenager stuff, like crushing on a girl or going to a house party, going on a field trip. The Amazing Spider-Man had this too, but not as much as Homecoming. I don't know, I like to see Peter in a normal high school setting. Also, I love the fact that they illustrate that he's a smart kid here. You'll see him in science class just making his webbing. He's also on the academic decathlon team. Am I saying that right? It was also mentioned that he was in the robotic labs club. So yeah, he's a smart kid and I like seeing that. And finally, the music was pretty decent. I wasn't blown away by it, but it was definitely serviceable. So clearly there's a lot that I liked. I find this movie very fun and entertaining, but there are a few things that I don't like that much, and we'll go over some of that stuff now.
Fortnite balls, I'm gay.
So for starters, I wish we didn't see his Iron Man as much as we did. It's good that he's kind of like an obstacle for Peter to overcome, because he keeps telling him not to do stuff and Peter does it anyway, but I would just prefer to see less of him. Like I was cool with seeing him in the beginning, and having Happy as the middleman, but he kind of just keeps periodically popping up throughout the movie, and it's just a little annoying that Peter seems a little obsessed with him. Like he wants to bring down the Vulture, which is good, but he also has another motive which is to impress Tony Stark, and to become an actual Avenger. So I would have preferred to see a little less of him. And I'm not the biggest fan of the suit. I think the design is fine, but it looks kind of weird in some shots. Like it might be the lighting or the fact that the CGI wasn't touched up. It just looks a little strange sometimes. And that's literally it. Everything else I'm okay with. Although I've heard people say that Peter doesn't suffer any consequences for his mistakes, but that's not entirely true. Like I mentioned, throughout the movie, Tony keeps telling him to leave this vulture guy alone, but he does it anyway. Eventually it gets to the point where it causes an accident on the ferry, and Iron Man takes his suit back. I mean, that seems like a pretty big consequence to me. And when he was in DC with his decathlon team, he ditched the event, which caused him to get detention. Or the house party when he didn't show up as Spider-Man, he gets made fun of by his classmates. And another big complaint I've seen is that Iron Man helps him too much. And I actually agree with this one. Iron Man does save his ass like 2 times, and like I already mentioned, you constantly see him throughout the movie. But I think that's actually kind of made up for during the big finale, where he doesn't have a suit, he's not in touch with Tony anymore. So during the final battle, that's all Peter. No assistance from Iron Man. No special suit, no calling for help. So yeah, I do agree that it was kind of annoying that Tony saved his ass twice, but I think it's made up for at the end where it's just him. And that's all I really gotta say. I really enjoyed Homecoming. I thought it was a really good follow-up to see what happened to Peter after Civil War. It has one of the best MCU villains. It has some really funny moments, as well as some really good emotional ones. And I was really excited when they announced its sequel, Spider-Man: Far From Home. So in 2019, we got the second MCU Spider-Man movie, Far From Home. And this one I'm pretty mixed on. After I first watched it, I thought it was okay. But after a few rewatches, I found more and more things that I didn't enjoy. I don't think it's a bad movie, and it's better than others in the MCU, but I wouldn't consider it top tier by any means. For this section of the video, it's kind of the opposite of Homecoming. I have more negatives say than good, so let's get into it. The action is great, it's all very top notch, and the special effects are good too. The final battle against Mysterio is a lot of fun, and not to mention these illusion sections are a blast. So no complaints when it comes to this stuff, it's fine. I even like the soundtrack more this time around. And the humor isn't as strong as Homecoming's, but for the most part, I think it all mostly lands. Now, Mysterio is a very decent villain. I just have a few issues with him, but overall, I think he's fine. Also, I like the different suits that we see Spider-Man wear. It goes through a few of them, and they're pretty cool. And that's really about it. There's quite a bit of stuff that I don't like, and even though I can look past most of it and enjoy parts of the movie, it's still stuff that I'm not a fan of, and it just annoys me. So for starters, Peter annoys me here, because he's very passive and is actively avoiding the main conflict. I get that he's on vacation and wants to relax, but he meets someone that he thinks is from another universe, and is told that these elementals pose a huge threat. Hell, he saw one of them and the damage firsthand, and he doesn't want anything to do with it, so he has to be forced to. It's frustrating to watch because he doesn't seem like the same kid that we saw in Homecoming and Infinity War. There, he would go out of his way to find trouble and stop it, but here he has to be forced to engage. Not to mention he hands over the Edith glasses to Beck after knowing him for a few days. Those are the last things that Tony Stark left him, and he just hands them over. And then he immediately finds out in the same night that he messed up. Jeez, it's almost like you should have just held on to them and kept them hidden until you felt you were ready. Did Peter get dumber in between movies? What the fuck is this? Peter and his decisions feel strange to me. His focus here is to just confess how he feels to MJ, which leads me to, I don't know where this crush that Peter got on MJ came from. He kind of becomes obsessed with impressing her. They only interacted a few times in the previous movie, and it was mainly her just insulting him. But for some reason, at the very beginning of this one, he just can't wait to tell her how he feels. This feels weird and strange because they weren't that close or cool in the previous movie, so I can't really get behind the relationship aspect here. Hell, in the previous movie, I feel Liz and Peter shared enough screen time and moments together to justify having a little romantic subplot. Plus, it works for the reveal of the Vulture being her father. Here, it just feels forced and comes from out of nowhere. Hell, if anything, this should have been the movie where they actually got close and got to know each other, and then by the end, Peter decides that he really likes her. That would make more sense. They have no chemistry here, and it feels rushed. And I get Peter has a crush on her because, you know, MJ and Peter get together in the comics, so duh they get together here, but I just wasn't feeling it. Now, I don't hate Mysterio, I'm just annoyed that they went the same route as they did with the Vulture origin, by tying it to Tony Stark in some way. They didn't really have to tie everything to Stark, so to me it feels similar to what we've already seen. A guy wronged by Tony, so now he's a villain. I mean, I really like Jake Gyllenhaal, so the movie gets bonus points for that, and I do like seeing how unhinged he becomes throughout the movie, and seeing just how smart he is with all his planning and how he tricked everybody. I just kind of roll my eyes at the fact that it's another villain that is somehow connected to Stark. By comparison, he is a much better villain than most of the others in the MCU, and he has moments that I really enjoy. Like for the first part of the movie, he's a standard generic good guy, because he's putting on an act, but for the second half, you see him how he really is, and he's just fun to watch. I'm just not really the biggest fan of it all tying back to Stark. And finally, there's a reveal in here that I thought was just dumb and out of character. Alright, so basically Nick Fury is being fooled by Mysterio, and I thought the whole time that Fury was kind of coming off as a chump for getting played. But in the post-credits scene, it's revealed that it's not Fury at all, and instead it's the shapeshifter pretending to be him, while the real Nick Fury is up in a spaceship chilling for some reason. Why? Why would Nick Fury just say fuck it and leave someone else in charge? It doesn't fit his character as we've seen him throughout the MCU. I thought it was just pretty dumb. Almost as dumb as him losing his eye to an alien cat. Motherfuckers! And those are my biggest issues with the movie. The rest is fine, and there's some small things that I can overlook that don't really affect anything. But this stuff always sticks out to me and annoys me when I watch it. But even with all the issues I have with it, I do find parts of this movie very entertaining, and I don't think it's terrible, and there's fun to be had here. And I can look past most of the things that I don't like about it and just enjoy it for what it is. I've seen people say that this is their least favorite Spider-Man movie, and I can actually understand that a little bit. To me personally, I think it's one of the most frustrating ones. But I don't think that's the worst Spider-Man movie.
Like, I'm thick. Like, I got ass. You see all this ass? Like.
And there you have it. That's what I think of the Tom Holland MCU Spider-Man movies. Clearly, I don't hate them nearly as much as others, and I find them both to be very fun and entertaining. But clearly, I prefer Homecoming over Far From Home. I think that's a better made movie with better moments. And of course, a while ago, I asked you guys, what did you think of the Tom Holland movies? And of course, it was fairly mixed from what I saw. But mostly everyone said that Homecoming was the better movie. But now I want you to go ahead and leave your comments. Let me know what you think about these movies. Are they the best Spider-Man movies? Are they the worst ones? Leave a comment and let me know. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and drop a like on it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.
I did it!
No, not exactly.
See you, chumps.